Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bob Harvey, and I'm the president and CEO of the Greater Houston Partnership. And thank you all for joining us for this second part of our State of the City event. In a few moments, we're going to hear a live fireside chat between Partnership Board Chair Bobby Tudor and Houston Mayor Sylvester Turner. I hope all of you were able to watch Mayor Turner's State of the City address, either live on October 22nd or since then. If you've not, please do go to our website, houston.org, and search State of the City to view it when time permits. Houston faces unique challenges in the midst of the pandemic and the economic downturn. Fortunately, Mayor Turner and his team are working to address these challenges head on. And we're going to hear a bit about how this is being done in just a moment. But before I turn things over to Bobby Tudor, I'd like to acknowledge our sponsors who've helped make this event happen. First, our platinum sponsors, AT&T, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Texas, Chevron, Citgo Petroleum Corporation, Comcast, Shell Oil Company, and Verizon. And our gold sponsors, AIG, BP America, HCA Houston Healthcare, Linebarger, Goggin, Blair, and Sampson, Motorola Solutions, North Houston District, Page, the University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center, and UT Health. Our silver sponsors, AECOM, BBVA, Centerpoint Energy, Cheniere Energy, Cigna Healthcare of Texas, Civil Tech Engineering, ExxonMobil Corporation, Haynes and Boone, HEB, Hughes Blackwell LLP, Jacobs, Kroger, Lone Star College, Norton Rose Fulbright, Port Houston, Prairie View A&M University, S&B Infrastructure, Texas Medical Center Supply, Texas Southern University, Traffic Engineers, Inc., Winstead, Union Pacific Railroad, and Zerinkelk Engineering Services. Our VIP reception underwriter today was Accenture. Our social media underwriter, Texas A&M University. Our program underwriter, Reliant, an NRG company. Our supporter, Houston Contractors Association. Our technology partner, Houston First Corporation, and our executive production partner, Vision. Thanks to all of these companies for helping make the 2020 State of the City possible. Now I'd like to turn things over to Bobby Tudor. Bobby, as I mentioned earlier, is the partnership's 2020 board chair and the chairman of Tudor, Pickering, Holt & Company, a leading energy investment banking firm based here in Houston. As some of you may recall, Bobby assumed the role of partnership chair at our annual meeting back in January by calling on Houston companies to help lead the global energy transition to a lower carbon future. We've taken some significant steps towards that goal this year, though the new challenges posed by the pandemic and the decline of the oil markets have slowed progress a bit, even as they've made the transition, frankly, more imminent. I know energy transition will be one of the topics Bobby and the mayor will discuss. So Bobby, the floor is yours.
Well, thanks so much, Bob. I'm honored to be here this afternoon to engage in this continuing conversation on the State of the City with Mayor Turner. But before we dive into that fireside chat, it's my pleasure to introduce the Mayor of the City of Houston, Sylvester Turner. First elected in December of 2015 and then again in December of 2019, Mayor Turner serving his second four-year term. He's our 62nd mayor. And what we heard some of this from Bob at the beginning, since taking office, Mayor Turner has expertly managed significant challenges facing the nation's fourth largest city, including budget deficits, homelessness, and natural disasters such as Hurricane Harvey. He is currently leading Houston's response to the COVID-19 global pandemic. Amid national unrest and calls for improving community and police relations, the mayor signed an executive order restricting the use of force, and he created a task force on police reform. Operating within the city's fiscal constraints, Mayor Turner has passed 5 balanced budgets, overseen Houston's remarkable rebound from Hurricane Harvey, championed historic pension reform, cheered on the 2017 World Series Houston Astros, and hosted a successful Super Bowl 51. He also expanded municipal investments in renewable energy and led the winning bid for Houston to host the World Petroleum Congress. Mayor Turner's signature priorities include complete communities, an initiative designed to revitalize and improve Houston's most underserved neighborhoods by partnering with local stakeholders to leverage resources to create a more equitable and prosperous city for all Houstonians. He also created the Hire Houston Youth program to provide jobs and internship opportunities for thousands of young people each year, and forged public-private partnerships to improve neighborhood parks and expand Houston's technology and innovation footprint. As the chief executive of the world's energy capital, Mayor Turner brings a performance-driven approach to his job. He's created a more responsive, streamlined, and efficient delivery of city services while shoring up Houston's financial future. Thanks in part to his leadership, local voters approved the pension reform package that reduced the city's liability by billions of dollars and provided a fix that had eluded the city for 17 years. As a lifelong resident of Houston, Mayor Turner is passionate about his city, and he continues to live in the Acres Home community where he grew up. He's a graduate of the University of Houston and Harvard Law School. Mayor Turner, on behalf of all of us, the members of the partnership and the community of Houston, welcome.
Thank you, Bobby, and it's good to be with you and the Greater Houston Partnership, and to Bob Harvey. Let me say hello to him again, and to all of the members and to those who are participating in the second part of the state of the city.
Well, Mayor, let's get started maybe with the obvious, which is the impact of COVID-19 on our region and how you've been navigating this ever-changing situation. As a city, we've seen several spikes in cases, and we built a testing and contact tracing regime. Over this time, the city has deployed an equitable system to bring tests to fixed sites, to mobile sites where the resources are needed, and to bring long-term care facilities, and even to bring help to individuals' homes when required. Can you give us just an update on how we got to where we are now with respect to the coronavirus, and where we still need to go from here to continue the safe and sustainable reopening of our community and importantly of our schools?
Well, Bobby, we are approaching the 8th month in dealing with this coronavirus. For many of us, we thought that by September, October, we will be on the back end. But this virus is just like one of those uncles that just will not go home and will not leave the premises. So for us in the city of Houston, the impact started in March when we had to bring the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo to an end. I'll never forget that, March 11th. And then we started canceling all of our conferences and conventions, from Sarah Week that we normally hold in March to the Offshore Technology Conference that we hold in May, to the World Petroleum Congress that we were expecting in December. So it has been a huge impact. In March, April, May, the number of cases in the city of Houston in terms of those catching the disease and those dying from it, our numbers were modestly low in comparison to what we were seeing in other parts of the country. But June, July, and August were very impactful months for us, where we had a surge. Hospitals were going to their surge capacity. Number of people dying, those numbers were on the high end. So those 3 months were tough. We all came back together. A mass order was put in place in July, the end of July, by the governor, requiring people to wear their masks. And then we went on a very intensive masked up campaign, encouraging people to wear their masks and social distance, proper hygiene. And then we saw those numbers start to decline in September and October. We did reach our positivity rate went from as much as 24% in the city. We got as low as 5% several weeks ago, and the goal was to go even lower, but 5% was the goal, and then drive it down even lower. We hit 5, and then the week later it started inching up to 5.6, then the 6.5. This week is at 6.7. So yesterday, for example, more than 100,000 cases were reported across the country. We've seen what's taking place in West Texas, and in El Paso is really out of control. The numbers in the Houston-Harris County have been, we are seeing a modest increase, more people coming down with the virus, more people in the hospitals, but still we're still in a very manageable position. But we're waving the red flag, and we're telling people, please be mindful of what's taking place in other jurisdictions. And if people will wear their masks and do all of the things we have repeatedly said for them to do, modify our behavior, then we can keep this virus in a manageable state until such time as there's a reliable vaccine. But until then, what we know the vaccine to be for right now, and that's the wearing of the mask. So that's where we are, modest but manageable increase right now, plenty of capacity within our hospitals, but we need people not to succumb to the coronavirus fatigue and keep their masks on when they're in the presence of other people.
You mentioned earlier, Mayor, the kind of financial impacts that the coronavirus has had on the city's finances. Could you say just a word or two about that and kind of where we are on the recovery path?
When businesses are closed, people are not going to the stores, not buying. The impact on our sales tax for the city of Houston is about $107 million just from sales tax. But there are other fees that have been adversely impacted. For example, there are not a lot of people that are parking downtown, okay? So we've had to recently adjust our parking revenues downward by $7 million because people are not parking, we're not getting the parking fees. Municipal fees, for example, are down. So there are a number of other areas other than the sales tax that are being adverse affected. Even our hot tax, because there are no conventions or conferences that are in town, dollars that would flow to our arts community, for example, those dollars are substantially down. So we are monitoring the situation very, very carefully. There has not been any appropriation from, let's say, from the federal government that will help to provide dollars to replace revenues that, let's say, local governments would normally bring in the absence of the coronavirus. We can't use the CARES funding that we have received from the federal government to replace a loss of cities' revenue. So we're having to make those adjustments, and I anticipate that the financial impact to the city of Houston will continue for the next probably at least 2, possibly 3 years, unless we receive some additional support from the federal government. Having said that, we'll have to make the adjustments, which means things will get tight. But when you start cutting personnel from the city of Houston, for example, you're directly impacting city services. But everyone is being impacted. Everyone is trying to make the adjustments. And that's why it is so important. Wearing your mask is not just about your own personal health, but the wearing of masks is also an economic helper. Because if the virus is manageable, then people will feel more comfortable with going to a store or with going to a restaurant, for example, or keeping their kids in school. So that mask is not just a healthcare deal. That mask is a part of what is needed for our economy and keeping our economy going and businesses open and even bringing people back to various events within our city.
On a related point, Mayor, in May, the city just released an updated framework for your Resilient Houston Plan, which is the city strategy for responding to unexpected shocks and systemic stresses of all sorts, of which you've certainly had more than your fair share during your tenure. And as we understand it, this guide will frame the city's response to and recovery from the COVID-19 public health crisis and the associated economic impacts. Across city departments, what can you tell us about the implementation of this plan and how will it advance both equity and resiliency?
And it does focus on shocks and stresses. And it's not just about natural disasters like hurricanes and storms, but it also touches on in transportation, in the healthcare industry areas, housing. There are about 62 action items as a part of the Resilient Houston Plan. The Climate Action Plan is also kind of embedded in the Resilient Houston Plan. And we kind of focus on four major areas: transportation, energy transition, building optimization, material management. All of those areas are a part of it. What we've discovered, Bobby, is that even after a storm like Hurricane Harvey, if the goal is to build back to where you were, then you're building for failure, and it doesn't work in the long term. Okay, so the goal is to build forward, and in order to build forward, you want to build a city that's stronger, more resilient, and more sustainable. And in order for that to take place, you got to take into account the shocks and the stresses that will come your way, like the pandemic. And the question is, how do you put the city in a better position such that when a pandemic comes again, we're in a better position to manage it or to minimize the adverse impacts from it. And this pandemic has really been an accelerator because it has helped to highlight those inequities that exist within the city of Houston, those vulnerabilities that exist in the city of Houston. And so it gives us, it magnifies our weaknesses, and then it affords us an opportunity to really start to design and construct a city that will put us in a better place such that we can withstand these shocks and stresses as we move forward. So there's about 62 action items, and it also helps us. We have 23 city departments, and what we're working on is to make sure that all 23 of our departments are aligned in accordance with the priorities that have been outlined, put forth through the Resilient Houston's plan. And then it goes beyond the city of Houston, just the municipal governance, to the city as a whole. It's important for us then to work in collaboration with our stakeholders, with the business community, nonprofits, you name it, such that the city as a whole will be in a better position to withstand these shocks and stresses in the future.
So closely related to that would be the city's climate action plan, which is designed to bring the business community and our residents and all other stakeholders together to help the city achieve carbon neutrality by 2050, I think is the goal that you've stated. And really to make, as you mentioned earlier, to make Houston a leader in the global energy transition towards a lower carbon future. Where do we stand with that plan, and what ways has COVID-19 impacted the climate action plan, and what do you expect from the plan's implementation in the next year or so?
Well, the pandemic has also served as an accelerator there, and not just domestically, but nationally as well as globally, because climate action is a global phenomenon. It's not just to the city of Houston. But I like what Bob had to say, Bobby, when he introduced you, because he talked about your emphasis on the global energy transition and a low carbon future. Quite frankly, in large part, the climate action plan that's the primary focus, and that is to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 2050 or sooner, and it is to put us in a much better place to continue to be the energy capital of the world. And in order for that to happen, we have to engage in energy transition. We don't walk away from all of the companies and the energy companies and others who have helped to put us on the map. But we do recognize that we are living in an evolving world. And we have, for example, these storms that are coming with greater frequency and greater intensity and costing all of us a lot of money. And we recognize this is not just about the environment. It's about our economic sustainability as well. And so it's in all of our interests to come together. There's no quote unquote federal mandate or state mandate, which means for our climate action plan, it calls for collaboration, bringing all the stakeholders to the table, coming up with something uniquely Houston that's a win-win and not a win-loss. And so when it talks about energy transition, it talks about working with our various companies in the city of Houston. We're working with BP, for example, that has provided a grant, no strings attached, that helped out with technical assistance, which helps out with our Office of Sustainability, which in part we will be using some of those dollars to put forth this climate change equity coordinator to make sure that we don't leave out any of our communities. We're working, for example, with Shell and with NRG in Evolve Houston, for example, where the goal is to electrify the fleet in our city 30 by 30, which means 30% of our fleet will convert to be electrically driven by the year 2030. So that's a part of the equation. We're talking about our buildings being run by renewables. In fact, as of July 1st in the city of Houston, we are 100% renewable in the city of Houston. So we're moving forward there. We're talking about working with companies, for example, to take contaminated space, like in the Sunnyside community, one of my complete communities, a 300 contaminated landfill, non-useful space right now, taking that and converting that into one of the largest urban solar farms in the United States of America. So it's working in collaboration with all of our stakeholders, with the business community, with our energy companies, because as you have stated before, energy transition is a part of who we are and our culture, and establish economic viability into the future. That's the city of Houston's climate action plan. And so I'm very excited about where we are, calling for 50 new 2.0 energy startup companies, working with, I think that, I can't think of this institution's name, get it confused, it's Rice, I think it's Rice University Carbon Hub. We're working directly with them. And at the same time, we're working with the University of Houston Carbon Management Program. All of that's embedded within the Climate Action Plan, which was just approved by the City Council in October, and the Office of Sustainability was approved at the same time. So I think it bodes well for the City of Houston, but we're not running away from our companies, but we're working with them to establish this energy transition, which will meet the goals of the Climate Action Plan.
Great. I think one of the things we would agree on is that if Houston doesn't show leadership in this area, we likely won't find the solutions broadly, because the expertise in energy systems and energy economics and the science of chemistry and physics and geology, that sits in Houston, Texas, and we're extraordinarily well positioned, we think, to do it, but we got to grab it. And that's the goal, and you're showing.
And one thing else I would add to it, Bobby, very quickly, and that is what we do, because we are a global city and we have global greenhouse gas emitters right here in the city of Houston, major energy companies, what we do here in the city of Houston will have a global impact.
Yep, we absolutely agree with that. You also discussed in your address, Mayor, that Houston is very well known for being the most diverse city in the nation.
Right.
But I assume you would also agree that it's important now that we work to make Houston America's most inclusive and open city.
Yes.
And arguably we have a way to go there. You've outlined your Complete Communities effort, which is a very proactive effort to advance racial equity and to strengthen social justice and to invest in underserved communities. So can you give us an update on this program and the work that's been done in the 11 Complete Communities to date, and then what you feel like the future holds there?
You know, I think the future is bright. Just what I would ask people to think about, anytime a group of people living in any community feel as though that they are being treated as secondhand citizens, left out, or where the investments are not coming their way, it's not going to be good. in the long run for any organization or for any city. And the answer to social unrest and racial inequity, regardless of what city you may live in, is investing in communities that have been overlooked for a long time. And when you look around, and if you see communities within your city where their parks are deficient, okay? In somebody else's area, you can go to a park and you see a beautiful, well-equipped park. You go to another community and the parks are inadequate. Insufficient playground, the walking trails are not available, nothing that really for them to do. When you see, for example, a lack of economic opportunities, businesses and jobs, when you see an absence of grocery stores, quality grocery stores. And I think sometimes people they get used, they can go to an HEB or a Kroger's in their communities and they take it for granted. But imagine a community where there's a food desert, where people can have, you can't tell them to have healthy options because there's not a quality grocery store, or their schools, their neighborhood schools are inadequate, they're inferior. Where, for example, if you deal with community and there's a high concentration of people with cancer, okay? Like in one of these complete communities, a high concentration, a high cluster in one of these complete communities. Well, that's what we have in the city of Houston. Do you know in the city of Houston, there are certain neighborhoods where the life expectancy is 24 years less than most other areas in the city? That's not in a third world country. That's not in another state or another city. That's right here in the city of Houston. And so the answer to racial inequity and social injustice is investing in these communities, these neighborhoods. Now, we don't have the resources where we can invest the same in a meaningful, impactful way in every community neighborhood. So I've selected a certain number, and I've asked people to leverage their resources on top of one another so that we can spread the risk, but bring about the greatest degree of transformation. I'm pleased to say, some have stepped up and who have contributed. I'm very appreciative of that. I did acknowledge in my presentation, Houston Endowment, for example, that came forward with a $2.5 million gift to complete communities. I certainly want to thank Ann Stearns and the Houston Endowment. There have been several companies. I know that Bob Harvey has asked people to contribute, and they have, so I want to acknowledge them. But I will also say we are a long way from where I thought we would be at this time. So, in terms of, we established my 50 by 50 park initiative, where we were selecting 50 local neighborhood parks and investing in them. We are starting construction on one of them now, and we're looking forward to starting with 10 others, but we're still a long way from where we need to be even on that end. So in this period of social unrest, there is a way to address it. And the answer is to get in front and not wait, for example, until Houston is seen on CNN because buildings are being burned, glasses, windows are being smashed, and rioting all in the streets. We don't need to get there. We don't need to get there. That's not the Houston way. And so hopefully even more people, more organizations, more financial institutions will respond to our ask and become significant players in complete communities.
Great. And on a related note, Mayor, I mentioned this in the intro, but on the heels of the George Floyd death and his connection to Houston, you commissioned a diverse group of community leaders to form a task force to propose reforms to our policing system. And they came forward with a whole long list of reforms, I think 104 of them or so. So update us on that. What do you hope to see in the next several months as the city takes action on these recommendations?
And I want to thank those 45 persons who worked on the Mayor's Task Force on Police Reform. Bob Harvey was one of those 45 participated, came forth with 104 recommendations. I've read the entire report. I am in overwhelming support of most of them. Probably 94, 95, 96 of them I support. For example, when it comes to reforming, substantially restructuring our Independent Police Oversight Board, we're going to do that. We're going to take steps to do that. There are certain things that we can do in the short term. There are certain things that we can do in midterm, and then some will be a little bit longer. But it's important for us to move as quickly as possible. We've already started to implement some. One of the key recommendations dealt with our crisis intervention response teams. And that is people who are suffering, especially now in the midst of this coronavirus, people who are suffering from mental behavioral health issues, substance abuse, domestic violence situations, which happens to be the most dangerous for our police officers. 40% of the injuries that our police or fatalities to our police officers come from responding to domestic disturbances. Just like Sergeant Harold Preston, who was fatally shot a few weeks ago, responding to a domestic disturbance call. And so several of those recommendations said that our crisis intervention response teams are good. They just need to be expanded to 24/7. And so we need more of them. And that is embedding clinicians, people, specialists with police, such that it's not just the classified police officers responding to these type of calls. And so we're looking to expand that, but it's also going to require additional support, financial support beyond what the city of Houston is capable of doing. But that will save a lot of lives, and it will help to minimize the police contacts and involvement with people who find themselves in distress, because there's a better way of dealing with it. We have a good model. We simply need to expand it. It calls for more training, de-escalation training. I fully support that, and we're going to move forward in that regard. So there were a number of very concrete suggestions that came forward. We want to implement them. We want to move as quickly as we can, because it's important for people to see us implementing that. When to release body cam, for example. I agree with their recommendations. So, we're going to move forward on those recommendations, but they were not just recommendations to the mayor and city council. They were recommendations, quite frankly, to the city as a whole. So we all need to invest in executing the recommendations outlined in that report.
Great, thank you. So let's move to state politics for just a moment. We are approaching the start of the next Texas legislative session.
Can we
You're
postpone?
coming up in 2021, and you're a former state legislator, represented the city of Houston in a very distinguished way for many years, and now as the mayor of the city of Houston. What's your perspective on the upcoming legislative session, and what are your goals for having a successful session?
Government works best when it governs least. That would be my mantra to the legislature. Start on whenever January the 7th or 14th, whenever it is, and adjourn the end of January and go home. That would be my preference. But look, it's a collaboration. We all serve the same constituency, and the same constituency pays the tabs for all of us. It's important for us to work together. I was a legislator for 27 years. And in large part, I was responding to the needs that were put forth by the mayor and our county judge and the business communities and others locally, because we just need to work together. And but I would tell you there's too much of a state versus local government these days. Hopefully there won't be nearly as much on that front. But when we are talking about dealing, for example, with the pandemics not just this one, but others to come, shocks and stressors. It will take collaboration between the state and local government. When we talk about, for example, the Ike Dike or the coastal spine with the potential surge that's coming down that could come next year, year after next, that's going to require the collaboration between the state and local government. So infrastructure needs, that's important between the state and local governments. So there are a number of issues that really call for us to work together. I look forward to working with our state leadership in order to meet the needs of our collective constituents.
Well, looking forward for just a moment, this summer, one of the kind of leading journalism voices in the technology world, a publication called FDI Intelligence,
Yes,
ranked Houston as number 3 among the world's top cities of the future for global business investment, human capital, and lifestyle. So you discussed earlier the efforts around bolstering Houston as a digital tech hub, and you highlighted some of our recent economic development wins in the whole kind of clean tech and innovation sectors. As we adapt to new ways of living and doing business in Houston, what are you most excited about as it regards Houston's future for those sorts of opportunities?
Because I'm excited about the fact that the collaboration that I've seen over the last several years. I mean, just the fact just before coming and being a part of this fireside chat, I was with Emily Reinkart with Greentown Labs. They're headquartered in Somerville, Massachusetts. They've now expanded to the city of Houston, and they're going to be occupying 40,000 square feet at that old Fiesta across from what used to be the Sears on South Main, where Rice University generously invested over $100 million in that building. And to their credit, they could have branded it as Rice, but they did not. And so that represents the innovation hub of the innovation corridor between downtown and the medical center. I'm excited about that. You have Plug and Play that was in Silicon Valley that has now expanded to hashtag Silicon Bayou. Generation X, Bill.com, Microsoft is a major player now in the city of Houston, and they are occupying space at the Ion. So I am excited about the fact that with this ecosystem, we're no longer walking into that space, but we are sprinting in that space. The venture capital that's been generated has been very positive. Again, when Houston plays together, we play to win, and we do win. And FDI pointed it out. This is an excellent place to invest in terms of real estate, in terms of expanding, opening up your business right here in the city of Houston. We are diversifying. We still retain the crown of being the energy capital of the world, but we are being even more innovative. This is the intellectual capital of the world right here in the city of Houston. Our green space is expanding. The Houston Open PGA is being played in Houston today at Memorial Park, where they've been absent for 57 years. There are a lot of exciting things that's happening in this city. And so what I would, and I think on balance, we're handling this virus better than most. So, and once this Uncle Corona, once it leaves and goes back home, then the city of Houston will be ready to play ball in a major way. Sports ventures, sports town, you name it, we have it. Whatever you want, it exists. Restaurants have been hit very hard, but we still have close to 11,000 right here in the city of Houston. So from a technological point of view, this ecosystem is ready to take off and is taking off. And so I'm excited about the future. I would encourage people outside of our city to come and invest. We are really marketing the city well, but there's plenty of room for investment opportunities right here in the city of Houston.
Well, Mr. Mayor, in the face of a lot of adversity, we really appreciate your leadership. We appreciate your positive outlook and commitment to our city. You've been a fantastic partner to the business community. in Houston. And we thank you for your service, and we look forward to accomplishing a lot here in the remaining years of your term. So thanks so much for your time this afternoon and for sharing your insights on what's ahead for our great city. So
Thanks.
before we close out this afternoon's event, I'll turn it back over to Bob for a few closing remarks.
Well,
Thanks, Bob.
thank you, Bobby. Thank you, Mayor Turner. What a great conversation, frankly, throughout. What a really positive, upbeat ending to it, as we talked about how really exciting the future is for Houston. And Mayor Turner, you and I and others are making a lot of calls on corporate CEOs around the country right now, talking about what a great time this might be to consider Houston. And I really think we're going to see some promising outcomes from these conversations. Thank you for taking the time to do that. It's been
Thanks,
great.
Bob. Thanks, Bob. Appreciate it, and look forward to working very closely with you and Greater Houston Partnership on the months and years to go. Only got 3 left, so let's run. We got to sprint. We got to sprint.
You got to, Mayor, it's been a sprint the whole time you've been mayor. Let me just tell you. All right. Well, the mayor reminded us, all of us today, that, we have a shared responsibility in making Houston a better place. And while many challenges remain, we have proven time and time again as Houstonians that we can accomplish great things when we work together. And I'm sure we will. Just a quick programming note. A week from today, Friday, November 13th, we're going to have our next Future of Texas meeting, where we're going to break down the election results with a focus on the impact on Houston and Texas. So to register for this event, visit houston.org/events. Future of Texas meetings are exclusive and complimentary to partnership members. So let me just conclude by saying thank you to all of you. Thanks for joining us today. Thanks for all you're doing to make Houston such a fantastic city. Enjoy the weekend. Get out, see the golf tournament. Look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you.